Hello, I'm Chris Flisher, and welcome to Turning of the Wheel, an intelligent, lively discussion about astrology, art, and spiritual adventure. Timing is everything, and as the great wheel turns, we are best prepared when we are best informed. Join me as I explore concepts that allow us to broaden our view of the world. You'll hear interesting topics, meet fascinating guests, and discover who you really are. Using the time-tested practices of astrology, you'll learn how to accept change as the great wheel of life turns. Astrology, art, and spiritual adventure on Turning of the Wheel TV with Chris Flisher. Hey, hello, and welcome to Turning of the Wheel. My name is Chris Flisher. As you know, this is a show about astrology, art, and spiritual adventure. And we're going to go on another adventure today. I talk about astrology quite a bit. I talk about art quite a bit. Spiritual adventure is another subject altogether, but it allows me to enter into a whole new realm of subjects, which is one of the things I like to do. We're going to be talking today about the chakras. That's C-H-A-K-R-A-S. People may not know what that is, but if you want to Google it, you'll get a better idea. I've got a fascinating guest who's going to help guide us through this process. His name is Peter Tadd. He's here from Ireland to help us discuss this great topic. Welcome back to the Turning of the Wheel. Peter, great to have you again.
Great to see you again. How are you?
I am well, thanks. I feel like my chakras are balanced today.
Good.
So,
I'll take credit for it.
You can take credit for it. Very good. So briefly, just give us an idea. I know what chakra is, but I want the audience to understand what they are so they can understand the premise and what we're talking about. So just give us the sort of the elevator speech, if you can, on chakras.
The chakra system is an ancient system that was discovered in India, and that's where the word comes from. Another word for these centers is Padma, which is a Sanskrit word for lotus. So these are centers within us that connect to actual glands in the body, the endocrine glands. So the most known chakra that people call the third eye. And that third eye connects to a gland in the brain called the pineal gland. And we know the pineal gland is activated by actual light. It has many cells in it that will be the same color as the cells in our eyes. So the chakras are energy centers, but they have definite physical corollaries. And also certain major nerves in the body relate to the chakras. And there's 7 of them. There are these, one at the top of the head, the forehead, then there's one in the throat, heart, solar plexus, sacral, and then at the base of the spine. So there are these 7 major areas. And these 7 major areas all correspond to a physical, tangible part of who we are as human beings. In other words, a flesh and blood piece of our lives, right? They have the correspondence to that. When they sort of are the, would you call them the control center for those parts of the bodies? Well, they're definitely, to me, they're the bridge between the mind and the body.
Okay, I like that. That makes sense, yeah. And so they, in order for a person to be complete, these need to be in balance, right? They need to be in harmony. They need to be in a sort of a conversation, an internal conversation between the chakras, that so they have a sense of, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a plumbing system where they're all working together, right? And that's
right. In a sense, we could think of our own physical various systems of the body, like digestion. So if we use that as an analogy, so yes, so the stomach and everything along the digestive tract has to be in good shape for us to absorb the food we eat. So what value does it bring to the human being to understand the chakras and how they are working in our lives? I mean, this is a big question, I understand, but what do we gain from knowing about them and being aware of them? Well, initially I think it has to do with what we identify with. Often we identify with our bodies, and we identify with our faces. We look in the mirror, and when we think of who we are, it's the face. This is me. But then we talk about, well, the mind or the soul, and well, what does that look like? That's intangible. We can't see it. Yes, unless you're clairvoyant, and you can see the aura, and you can see the chakras. So to me, from my clairvoyant abilities, I see that part of us. So really, I'm seeing your soul when I look at your chakras. Interesting. And that is a sort of, it's not body language, but it's a variant of that. I guess for the everyday public, the best way to describe that would be, oh, it's sort of like your body language. You're sort of expressing yourself a certain way. We all have motions and actions and ways of expression
that sort of probably perhaps are representative of the balance or the imbalance of the chakra system.
Right, and often if there is a problem with the way energy is flowing, because the chakras spin and they breathe, they move in and out, they move forward, and also their dorsal aspects moving from the spine in the opposite direction. So when I do a clairvoyant reading and I'm scanning somebody and I see a block in the chakra, they go, oh yeah, well that's where the pain is. Oh, I always have this problem with my neck. And that's the corollary.
I see. So, and these are, how would you describe them? Would you describe them as energy centers? Are they, circuitry of sorts within our bodies?
Well, yes. I mean, so we have to define what we mean by energy. Mm-hmm. So we know there's electrical energy that moves through the nerves. We know there's an electromagnetic field around us that's also measurable.
Right.
We also have meridians, acupuncture meridians, that have also been detectable now by more refined instruments. And there are ways to photograph parts of the chakra with certain kinds of photography. So it's all energy. And one of the things, and almost one of my bugaboos, is the word energy, because people use it, but they don't necessarily use enough specifics to indicate, well, which layer or part of that energy complex are we talking about?
Meaning that when someone says that person's got great energy, we don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah. So
it's not specific.
It might mean, that they're really vital and healthy, and you would see that as a white light in the aura. It could be that they're really warm and tender and affectionate, which would be a very expanded heart chakra, which would exhibit colors of pink and gold light.
Interesting, yeah. So it's the relationship of the colors. So the colors are representative of the state of the chakra.
The colors are a language of the soul. So colors actually have meaning. We use the term like out of the blue.
Right.
Or true blue.
I'm in the pink.
I'm in the pink. So when someone is true blue, blue is the color that I associate with truth itself.
Truth, loyalty, all those things.
Love appears as a rose color. Pink is a color of affection. Red is a very interesting color, because some people say, oh, red is anger. Red in the aura is anger only when tinged with orange.
Okay.
But when there's a really rich red, that can be courage. It's a strong, fiery, but it isn't a negative strength.
I know exactly
it's a
what
positive
you mean.
strength.
I know exactly what you mean. There's that, because it's representative in astrology. We would think of the red being Mars. Now, Mars is about aggression, it's about ambition, it's also about anger. So it's how you turn that, how you direct that energy that determines the validity, I guess, as well as the effectiveness of the color.
Yeah.
And the chakra.
And so the other thing that I see is the clarity of the colors. So when a color is very clear in someone's aura, you know that that's good. When the colors become dull and heavy, people feel that. Wow, I'm feeling, we talk about feeling heavy. Mm-hmm. And the heaviness appears as dullness. And then you can see black in the aura. And black in the aura can be good or bad, actually. There are good blacks, and there's even good gray colors.
I would think black would indicate a certain depth, a certain spiritual depth of some sort, willingness to go beyond and into the depth. Is that correct?
You're very good. I really like you. I don't know if it's just your intuition or what, but I had a wonderful experience with a Native American Indian named Dennis Banks, who's one of the co-founders of AIM, and he's presently, up in Keystone with the pipeline protesting there.
Good for him. Yeah, good.
And when I met Dennis, what surprised me is the first time I saw this black in his aura, but it was like looking at the night sky. Mm-hmm. And what I saw with that was this unformed place. It was like before even there was light, and it was just profound without any distinction.
Oh, wow. So that is a thing. So people tend to associate black with, this is largely based on Hollywood, black and white, the sort of the construct of colors, but I think that they represent, we have got to look beyond those limitations and get into the depth.
Yeah, and what happens is we really have a kind of knee-jerk reaction around just that it's black or white.
Right.
And black has a really bad rap. But black, as you know, in the yin-yang symbol, represents the feminine. It represents the unknown. It represents the mystery.
Depth.
And depth. And so we in the West and I would say perhaps more men than women, are uncomfortable with the unknown, are uncomfortable with that black, and so we try to negate it, or in some ways just avoid it.
Avoid it, yeah. It's interesting. I think a lot of us, and this is what we try to do here with our conversations, is to sort of open up our minds to these concepts, because there's far more that's available to us in these tools that come from these ancient esoteric practices that allow us to deepen our understanding of ourselves, work with them to a way where they've effectively help us heal. Because ultimately what we want to have is balance. We want balance in our lives. We want to have balance in our chakras. How does someone go about balancing their chakras? Would they come to someone such as yourself and you'd be able to say, well, you're out of balance here, so we need a little more blue in you, or we need a little more yellow in you, or how is that process?
Great question. There are lots of ways to approach our chakras, and color is one way.
Sound is another one?
Sound is another way, because there are tones that work with the chakras. One thing that I'm teaching presently is how to use hand positions. They're called mudras.
Oh, mudras, yeah.
And there are mudras that have come to me spontaneously. And when you place your hands in a certain way in front of the chakras, all of a sudden you feel them. And this is a really big aid, particularly for people who try to meditate and they spend too much time in their heads and they don't feel like they're getting anywhere. Because a lot of times that's all we sense is something going on in the crown chakra or the forehead chakra. But to be more incorporated in the meditation experience, when we bring our hands down, all of a sudden we're feeling the body, not just the space around our heads. The mental relaxes, and meditation can be a lot more enjoyable that way.
If you were to make a general sort of observation of humanity as we are today, and this may be too difficult a question for you right now, do you see a common blockage in society? Is that too large of a question?
No, it's a great question. You're absolutely right. I mean, I've been at this for about 35 years, so I've seen a lot of people. I travel all over the world, I teach workshops, and I see a common theme in the West, which is the solar plexus chakra. Solar plexus chakra is an overwhelm, because solar plexus chakra deals with our mental activity. It also has to do with our eyes and the information coming through the eyes.
That's the eye, yeah.
And so we are so overwhelmed with info, and we're so overwhelmed by everything that's happening in the world, that our solar plexuses are not in good shape. And I see that for men and women. In terms of men and women, there is also a generalization that men tend to have a blocked root chakra, and women tend to have a blocked crown chakra.
Interesting.
And the crown chakra represents belief and orientation, but it also represents authority. And so when women have had experiences in a male world where the authority figures are men and they aren't given the equal say or equal pay or equality on many, many levels, the crown tends to be affected by that. So it isn't just the energies running through us, it's that chakras also reflect our environment. And for men, it's about sex and money and being honest with that.
Does the universe or the cosmos or the planet have a method for correcting this? You know how the laws of natural selection sort of are, we adapt to our environments. Do you see us adapting to that, that blockage in some way on a large sort of societal basis?
Yeah, I see women are coming forward.
Right.
I think we see that in...
So that would equate to balance. The pendulum is swinging to where we're getting equality.
Right, and so that women are stepping into their power. They're being recognized. There in many areas where there are quotas where women have to be in government, in boards of companies. And not that women take on the roles as men, but that women apply a feminine approach to these positions of power.
Yeah, and that is sorely lacking. And I think that that is something that's been out of balance for quite some time. So the idea of this transition really is sort of nature or the planet or the cosmos, however you want to look at it, correcting, self-correcting in some ways, or accommodating to make this happen? And this is just part of the natural evolution of humankind. You know, I believe that there is a pendulum that swings from one side to the other very, very slowly, and that what we're looking for and striving perhaps is that equanimity. But we live in a dualistic world, always have, always will. Everything about our lives is dualistic, and so we are always going to be in the state of flux between one side and the other. Trying to achieve equanimity would be the desired effect, but is that possible?
Well, that is the goal of enlightenment, right? Is to get beyond this polarity. I mean, as you say, there are fluxes, and there's yin and yang, and there's day and night. And so in our physical experience, there has to be a rhythm. But to allow that rhythm to move in a natural sense, and to accept that. I mean, everyone is going to have highs and lows. But beyond that, from the spiritual context, by moving to a place of accepting and understanding that all of us are interconnected. Everything is talking to each other. I experience that in many ways with my sensitivity. I've had experiences with trees, with insects, with all kinds of animals, and every being that I now have that awareness of is communicating. I've had really remarkable moments with trees where all of a sudden I'm aware that they're aware of what I'm saying. They're listening. Imagine next time you go for a walk that the trees are hearing your conversation, and see what that's like.
Interesting. But you know, the idea of that sort of that polarity and the positive and negative, and that's not to ascribe a judgment on those qualities. It's just, you know, like the negative and positive charge of magnetism, for example, the yin and the yang, as you mentioned earlier. There has to be a certain amount of friction between the two in order to generate progress and in order to see evolution. So it's natural that there would be a little bit of tension there. But when that tension's out of sync or out of whack or one-sided, we don't get the harmony, we don't get the progress we need. Do you think that we're entering into a stage where we would see more harmony in that regard? It certainly feels as if we're on the crux of it. It's not an easy task or an easy place to get to, but we feel as if we're getting there. Do you think that if people were more aware of their chakras and paid more attention to their esoteric qualities, that they would be able to achieve this on a much larger basis? I mean, change begins with us.
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and I would respond in this way, that when we look outside and we value ourselves by the stuff we have, we get caught up with a sort of carrot on the stick, and the carrot keeps getting bigger, and we keep chasing it, and we keep wanting more. If we then reverse that orientation inward, and we realize that we need to invest in ourselves energetically, emotionally, and personally, and we value certain qualities and characteristics. This is something that was very common in the past, and not such a distant past. For example, in China, there is this quality of te, and te has to do with your personality, but more than your personality, the way you are with other people, the way you are with yourself, the way you are with life. And so you have to cultivate generosity, you have to cultivate goodness. And that's a treasure, and that's the profound aspect that you're talking about. And that's the so-called yin side, the unseen part. We don't see the insides of ourselves, but we can feel good. And when we feel good, we can have a lot, we don't have a lot, we're not attached to the stuff we have, because our sense of self isn't determined by the material world.
And it does seem as if, you know, as you mentioned, the idea of trying to achieve this balance, and I think that in ancient and in older cultures, I think this was more achievable. I think we are driven by a distraction that has removed that quality from us. You know, we have to sort of, I believe that there's a desire and a need and a necessity to get back to these ancient traditions, because I think that's where we're going to find our greatest harmony. I think we've gone astray. Now,
I would agree.
Going astray may be a necessary exercise in order to remind us. You know, you have to sort of have contrast in life.
Yeah, well, Donald Trump's a great example of that.
Yeah, he sure is. If we don't have the contrast, we don't have a reason to act. There's no raison d'etre. You've got to have that sense of the contrast has to be there. In other words, we wouldn't enjoy the sunny day if we didn't have the rain. I mean, that's a very simple analogy, but you know what I'm saying. We have to have that dualistic quality there. What's happened, I believe, in our cultures is we've gotten further away from the core basics of what our earth and our basic instincts are asking us to do. And I think technology, for all its beauty, has gotten into the way of that and cluttered our minds up, as you say. That's that chakra that is just the solar plexus is shot. It's stimulated beyond belief. I would imagine that nature, by virtue of its own self-correction, would accommodate that somehow and bring that to a culmination, perhaps, whereby we begin to peel away that and slow down in an effort to regain that. And I think we're seeing the evidence of that in such people such as yourself, and sort of your idea of trying to slow this down, bring awareness to ourselves of these energy centers, make our time less about that cell phone screen or whatever, and more about what's going on around it. We're missing so much if we don't do that. And I think that the chakras, and the fact that they're so overloaded in the way that you're mentioning, I think clearly indicates that we are hitting that wall in some ways. I do think we have to hit the wall, though. You know what I'm
Hitting
saying?
the wall and having problems is really essential.
I agree. Yeah.
I think problems are gifts. And what happens when you run into an issue is you have to focus on the problem. And when you focus on the problem, you find out more about life. You find more about many things.
Trial and error. What's the best lesson you ever learned is when
Right.
would that
And
hurt?
so this is in psychology called points of entry. So if you're sick and you go to a doctor and then you're not happy with that, and then you go to an acupuncturist and you might try herbal medicine, you would have never discovered what acupuncture was, and maybe the philosophy behind it, or about a relationship to plants, until you got sick. So the sickness is the greatest thing that could happen. So problems are great.
Well, they are prods. They are things that make you get off your tail and get things done. You know, if you go on a walk every day with a stone in your shoe, and you're walking all day long and the stone's in your shoe, I've done that myself, and many times I've kept the stone in there on purpose. Even though I knew it was bothering me, I kept the stone in my shoe as I did my walk, just so I would say, I'm aware of that. Sort of as a reminder of what it's like to experience that. Then they get back home, take the stone out, and say, oh, wow, fantastic, what a great relief. But in that process of the contrast of you get a lesson is learned. Nothing comes easily, and we have to hit these points in life where those lessons, as difficult as they may be, are things which help us evolve and move to the next stage. It's sort of like falling off a bicycle. You got to get back on again and ride it away. And
so one of the things is that sometimes we have a problem that doesn't go away. Sometimes it's chronic. And so that's one of the things that I started to do when I was working in New York City for Frankie Lipman, who was a medical doctor there. And I was focused on psychosomatic issues. And people could not get through because he was using both acupuncture and standard medicine. And I would find there would be traumas locked up in a particular chakra. And I could help the person unwind that trauma, and then the physical symptoms would disappear.
And you'd focus the acupuncture on that particular chakra?
Oh, I would use different techniques that I had.
Okay.
So I could regress them into childhood. I'd have them work on a combination of things, but basically create an energetic release so that it wouldn't, because you have to get to the actual root of the problem, or the layer of energy where the information is. And that's where the chakras come in. And it's also like in meditation. We can meditate, we can relax the body, we can follow the breath, we can just calm ourselves down from a very busy day. But if you want to go beyond that, if you want to go deeper into your own alignment to your cosmic self, to a part of you that goes beyond what we would consider our relative human identity, that's where the chakras come in handy.
Do you think that we enter the world balanced?
No.
So we come into the world with
everybody
flood.
comes in with karma. Everybody comes in with lessons to learn at this time.
So we come in unbalanced, and our goal is presumably, or ideally, to achieve balance.
Yes, and people come in with various degrees of balance and imbalance. But I want to put a qualifier on that children tend to be way more balanced when they come in than as they go through life. It isn't that they learn to balance themselves. There's so much that goes on because I don't think we treat birth properly. We don't treat the earliest ages of development properly. The school system. I was involved here in Massachusetts with a school called the Caduceus School that we started in 1974 as an alternative. I'm a firm believer in child-centered education. And if you work with children and you honor that they are creative beings, they've come in already knowing what they're to do.
Sort of, there's a bit of a DNA comes with them. This sort of this is where we see personality traits. You always wonder why am I like my mother or my father? Well, maybe you've sort of come in with that sort of like a preloaded software stack.
Right. Or you come in unlike your mother and father.
Right. Even
and then what do you do with that? Because they don't know how to make sense of you.
Right.
And there are a lot of kids who are coming in that are very gifted. You know, this whole story with indigo children. There are many very amazing beings coming through, and they need the freedom to literally be themselves and actually teach us, because they're coming from a purer place, a less conditioned place.
I would say that it's cumulative. I think that knowledge and innate characteristics are cumulative over time. You know, that where a child coming into the world today is going to have an accumulation of intelligence that's been derived from of civilizations and people and generations before that. So they come in as, like, you know, the next version of the software, for using that analogy. In that process, I think that you're right, they can teach us. And that is an old age adage, you know, out of the mouths of babes comes the wonderful, you know, the wisdom that we have, that we can't see perhaps because we're too clouded.
But I've worked with children who are, let's say, clairvoyant, and they see things around. They can see sometimes fairies. And parents who don't see at that level are upset by this. And they want to stop that activity because they don't understand it. And actually, that is that's something for me that's very difficult to abide by.
To get across as well, I'd imagine. So if people were more attuned to their chakras, and understood how they could achieve a sense of equanimity within themselves, a sense of balance within themselves, a sense of, I think it would bring an inner harmony that would make you feel like your engine is running just the way it should. But that may not be an easy task. I think that requires work. Not everybody wants to do the work. I think that's probably part of the problem.
It is, and I think part of the problem also is this identity thing I brought up earlier, is that if we identify with our spirituality, if we say that I'm in this body now, I've had previous incarnations, I'll have future ones, what are you going to take with you? You're going to take your chakras with you. You're not going to take your bank account or your car or your house.
That's a good point. And that's a large part of what we're talking about, is in some ways is using these energy centers in a way to elaborate to sort of work with your assets and correct your liabilities. This is what I talk about when I do astrology. When I meet an astrology client, I'll say, we're going to see you've got a lot of assets, but you've also got liabilities. And that is a balancing act that you want to try to attain a sense of equanimity between the both. And the chakras are a clear representation of that, of where you can put your energy into it. I think it's really valid. Interesting discussion. The chakras are very complicated. They require more. I encourage you to reach out to Peter Tad via his website. Contact him. And thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's always great.
It's great to see you again, Chris.
You've been listening to Turning of the Wheel with your host, Chris Flisher. To schedule a reading with me or to order artwork, you may visit my website at www.turningofthewheel.com. That's www.turningofthewheel.com. Or you can call me at 978-393-1036. Thank you. And as always, be open to possibilities.